I mean, 6 o'clock, 12 o'clock, right?
Yeah, I think we right on time.
Okay. I'll admit people to get in. And I'll just lock the room in 7-8 minutes or so. Yeah. Mary, can I unmute you?
Okay. You got it?
Oh, yeah?
Okay.
You're unmuted, right? Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Shall I start and go ahead?
Sure.
Okay. Okay, 30 minutes. Okay. Hello, everyone. Good evening from Bournemouth, and good morning, good afternoon to you all. Welcome to Southeast Asia Tourism COVID-19 and Silver Linings ? Session. And hope you have your warmth in your hands. So this is tea time chat. So it's an informal conversation about what we've been observing or suggesting for the future opportunities for Southeast Asia region and the tourism. And we have a really exciting speakers here. I was so happy they accepted my invitation. We have a Kathleen. She's a professor in anthropology at Loyola University in Chicago. And she's done extensive research work in Southeast Asia, especially Indonesia. And she also has a recent book published, Indonesia, History, Heritage, and Culture, right?
A little book for novices to Indonesia.
So hopefully we do another session on her book in the future, near future. Hello, Kathleen, how are you?
Hi. Can I also put in a plug for another book that Naomi was the lead person on? She's here and on my screen, just in the box below me, a co-edited volume, Naomi Late, at Quetzal Castaneda, myself, called The Ethnography of Tourism, Ed Bruner and Beyond.
Thank
just
you.
came out.
Hello, Naomi.
Naomi!
Thanks for joining us. And we have Giang. She's an assistant professor at Alborg University, Denmark, and she's also working for a community-based tourism consulting organization based in Vietnam. And she also recently organized very interesting walking workshop in mountains in Vietnam where scholars present their ideas while walking. Fascinating idea, but there was people COVID time, right? Hello, Giang, how are you?
Very good, thank you. And I think I have to say that we were very lucky that we finished the walking workshop right on time, and then after everybody left, then the lockdown started to happen. So
that was early January?
Yes, it was January this year.
Right timing, right? Very lucky. And we have a last speaker, Mary. Aloha, Mary.
Aloha.
Mary is a professor in geography at the University of Hawaii, and she also has done extensive research work in Southeast Asia, including Myanmar and Thailand. And she also recently published multiple articles on COVID-19 and its impact and issues around COVID in tourism and geography. So welcome, Mary. Welcome, everyone. So Southeast Asia, as we all know, one of the most tourism-reliant regions in the world. The impact has been, economically speaking, quite negative. But for 30 minutes today, I want to talk about something positive, any positive futures and silver linings, ? But at the end of our session, I hope ? becomes exclamation mark. So here's my first question. Besides all the negative economic impacts, do you see any re-emerging or emerging positive opportunities for the countries you've been researching? Or I know, Giang, you're from Vietnam, or so maybe Indonesia?
I can speak to that if you'd like. I want to first thank you for organizing this because it's a lot of work and a lot of time, and it's pretty thankless. And I want to say that you really identified an important topic. I think it's really important right now for everyone that we not only look at the devastating impacts of the coronavirus on people's lives, but also we find some bright spots, some lighter spots, and they might be few and far between, but I think that it's important to identify them, not just to offer solace, but to give us a path forward. to make us see directions we can move towards that might impact people whose lives have been torn apart by the end of tourism, for instance. How might there be paths forward for them to survive economically, emotionally? And so I want to thank you for finding the silver linings, or for turning our attention towards the silver linings. And I also want to say something in tandem with this that I've been thinking a lot about. Many of us can't go to the places where we do our research, and we're sort of stuck researching at a distance, or keeping up, I really should say, as best we can at a distance, which has some really serious limitations. So I think this is a moment that forces us to do what we should have been doing all along, which is collaborating with local scholars, local researchers. And for me, this is a very broad, it's not just pertaining to Southeast Asia, but it's a really broad and important thing that we should think about doing throughout our careers. And so this underscores the importance of that. And that to me is an important silver lining, but it doesn't impact people's lives in the spots, the souvenir sellers and others, but it might get them more recognition for their collaboration in our projects, or their helpfulness and their information sharing in our projects. I also want to say that too often, right now, there's a temptation to focus just on the devastation. A natural temptation is important to look at these impacts and how we might find interventions that are positive. But I wanted to say that we risk doing what Nancy Shepherd-Hughes talked about as a kind of pornography of violence in other times and other places, that we risk doing something akin to that and doing a pornography of the pandemic and pandemic tourism. And I really think it's important not to fall into that trap, to listen to scholars who really know what they're talking about, but not to further fuel that. And so I want to say that, you know, we can find spaces where there's been tremendous agency. And in Indonesia, we've seen a lot of new kinds of creativity emerge from souvenir craftspeople. Where I work in Toraja, there's been a burst of this kind of creativity. And I don't want to dominate, but I'd be happy to offer examples of the ways in which souvenir craftspeople have found new markets in the pandemic that have been so impressive and so inspiring. And I think it's important we look at how people have used their own agency and are not just being passive victims. So thank you for the topic.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Actually, I recently read your article about the local, working with local researchers and knowledge co-production. It was so inspiring, and I think it's. I know we're talking about the industry and market, but it's really good opportunity. We start thinking about working with the local academics and actually learning from them, not they learn from Western scholars, So yeah, that's really inspiring. And I was just listening to a webinar session right before this, organized by Burmese academics. I never actually met any Burmese academics in tourism. It was so inspiring hearing from what they know and their wisdom and knowledge. So maybe this, not paradigm shift, but this can kind of shake up even our academia, how we produce knowledge. So there's one silver lining there. And again, the innovation for tourism market and local owned, right? So that's a good opportunity. Giang, do you have any example or thoughts on Vietnam side? I'll unmute you. I don't know why you're mute, right? Oh yeah.
Okay. Yes. So I would like to say that we have often overlooked the importance of domestic tourism. And in Vietnam, we have 80 million domestic tourists annually, compared to only 18 million international tourists. So if you look at the size and the potential of the markets, then domestic tourists has always outweighed international tourists. But at the same time, the attention from the industry, from the lobby, from the government, and also from the academia is always mostly into international tourism. So for Vietnam, we was very lucky that we had no local transmission in the last 2 months. It was a huge achievement, and it enabled the society to function again at normal, including domestic tourism. So in general, the market, we've already got very strong infrastructure all over the place, but a lot of the time, this infrastructure was preserved for international tourists. So if you think about inequality as well, it's mostly, okay, these pristine nature and all of this luxury resort, for instance, it's mostly international tourists that come and enjoy. But right now there's a huge stimulation and the promotion to allow domestic people to come and enjoy the same service. And they have money. The middle class in Vietnam, and I'm sure in many of the South Asian countries, have money to enjoy these sort of services and also sort of stimulate the domestic tourism. At the same time, it gives space for the tourism businesses to understand the needs of domestic tourists, because for a long time, we also focused too much on international tourists. So they need to treat them as a real source of potential customer and revenue, and really have to find a way for them to return. So tourists, when they go to, for instance, Europe, like South Asian, they have this huge thing for Europe. And when they go to Europe, for instance, they keep coming back many, many times. But in their home country, they go to a destination and that's it, they don't come back. So we now have space to reflect and think through, okay, how can we really develop services for domestic tourists so that we gain their loyalty and they come back many times. I have another point on community-based tourism, but maybe I should give space for other people first, or should I keep going?
Maybe we'll come back to you after Mary.
Yeah.
Thank you, Giang.
First, I also would just want to echo Kathleen's sentiments. I really appreciate you putting this together. I know it seems like a very casual conversation, but there's actually quite a bit of work that goes into sort of setting it up and making sure everyone on social media sees the flyer and that kind of thing. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mary.
And I was really just looking forward to seeing everyone's lovely faces. So, and also I just want to point out that Hong Lu Sin is here. Who is an expert in and many things COVID related, especially as they relate to Singapore. So if, it might be interesting if Hong Lu wants to jump in at some point.
Oh yeah, definitely.
In terms of Thailand, yeah, I mean, I would just echo what was just said in terms of domestic tourism, right? So in Thailand, they have an ongoing, it just started this month actually, it's a 22.4 billion baht domestic tourism stimulus plan. And this is definitely unprecedented for Thailand, but basically it's government subsidies on things like accommodation, transport, food, and different kinds of attractions for the domestic audience. And so this is very exciting for Thailand, which has long been a sort of hot spot for international tourists. And Thailand seems to be using this as an opportunity to shift away from what they're quite well known for in terms of backpacker tourism and kind of the cheap, like no cost tours, group tours, right? And so right now they seem to be shifting towards trying to attract the wealthier tourists. I mean, that has its own set of problems, right? So what we may end up seeing is that we have all of the positive aspects of the democratization of tourism that go along with budget airlines and sort of cheaper hotels and this kind of thing may be lost to some extent when there's a shift towards higher value tourists, right? And so I think on the positive side, though, we do see that the shift towards domestic tourism is quite exciting for Thailand, right? It's a chance to really rethink where the value is and also how to protect some of the areas that have been well known as sites of over-tourism. So Maya Bay would be an important example that closed down just in 2018. But there are many other places in Thailand that are widely affected by over-tourism, ecological sites, as well as important spiritual and religious sites that are sort of overburdened with tourists, whereas they hold important cultural value for residents. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot going on in Thailand in terms of how do we shift tourism to something that's more sustainable, that we actually get the value of our tourist product. So I mean, Thailand is one of the most popular places in the world to travel for tourists, right? So in many ways, it's a chance to really figure out how to get the most value out of that while also protecting the important ecological as well as cultural sites.
Mm. So it's kind of good opportunity to kind of pause and think about the ecological and social issues. And Thailand, the tourism authorities of Thailand just announced they reposition themselves as a touristic destination.
That's right.
I thought, yeah, that was really interesting with the measurement, transparent data. So that's really interesting, and they're always ahead of the game in Southeast Asia tourism. But of course, the measurement and data should be actually there with evidence than just as a marketing strategy, right? That will be interesting.
Yeah, that's right. In fact, they've just come up. So the Tourism Authority of Thailand is creating what they're calling a Security and Health Administration certification, right? So, I mean, we'll see how this works itself out. Yeah, it'll be really interesting to see sort of what kinds of measurements are needed, as well as the ways that certification always contributes to unequal access to, there's always unequal access to certification, right? So certification costs money. And so those with access to certification processes are able to bring people in to verify the site will benefit from that in a way that more marginalized communities will not.
Definitely, yeah. I had the second question about domestic tourism and regional tourism, if they can replace the international tourism. But also I was wondering if this pandemic can open up an opportunity for like remote, rural, poor areas in Southeast Asia, beyond Bangkok, beyond Chiang Mai, beyond Bali. Are there some people want to go to quiet places now? So do they have opportunities? Kathleen, oh yeah, you're on mute. You're mute, right? Oh yeah.
I just heard from a friend, an artist friend in Toraja this morning, that Bali has asked to send 1,000 of the foreign tourists that are stranded there to Toraja to relieve some of the pressure to have them in more remote places. And for people in Toraja is an ethnic indigenous community in Sulawesi in Indonesia that has been receiving a lot of tourists over the past few decades, but certainly not as many as Bali. And I think what we're seeing on behalf of the Indonesian government is an effort to do just what you're talking about, to send people to destinations that are not as frequently targeted by kind of mass international tourists. And for Torajans, this of course represents a potential way of having some revenue come in. I'm told that they will be, again, health certified. So we're having, again, a certain kind of class and economic ability. In terms of domestic tourism has long dominated the numbers in this part of Indonesia. And I would suggest elsewhere, going back to the 1960s, President Sukarno, Indonesia's first president, pushed for domestic tourism as a way to know Indonesia, love Indonesia, to kind of find brotherhood or sisterhood, I would say today, in all of the diversity that is there. And throughout the decades, domestic tourism and what we might call in the literature friends and family, visiting friends and family tourism, but I would say really needs to be thought of more along the lines that Kadir Din has written about, pulang kampung, returning home to homeland villages for visits when you've long been an urban resident, maybe first, second, third generation. This is a big thing, and I think that that will be an engine that continues, particularly as it gets healthier to travel. So I would say we way too long overlooked domestic tourism, even though people have been writing about it for a long time. It's only come onto the radar in recent times, and that this will help dramatically.
Yeah. I think I definitely agree. And in the case of the CBT travel system in Vietnam, so I think it was founded by Mr. Giang, and now I think from 2014 to now they had like 80 projects in destinations that had no tourism before. So their goals were to develop new products and then attract the sort of market to that destination that's not really relying on the normal sort of like big market like Sao Paulo or Hanoi, for instance. And in the beginning, they attracted international tourists because they believe that's where the money is. But in recent years, they have changed their sort of strategy because Vietnam got 54 ethnicity. And I'm sure like it's similar with Thailand, which also got a lot of minority ethnicity. And they bring in different culture as well, even for Vietnamese, which is the majority of Vietnamese King people. And we don't know a lot about the other ethnicity. And these minority ethnics also live in often remote area with beautiful landscape. So it creates this beautiful mix for domestic tourists to come and enjoy. So I think right now they have around 40% of domestic tourists and 60% of international tourists. And this pandemic had helped them to also start to refocus and target more domestic tourists. But another thing that I find important is that they always develop products based on diversified livelihood. So whatever these local people are doing, tourism is only an extra source of income and not the key things. So when the pandemic happened and tourism stopped, they are fine. So people go back to their normal job, you know, they're farmers anyway, and they, you know, even the owner of the homestay. So after a few years, they become accustomed to relying on income of tourism. But when pandemic stopped, they still got income from raising pigs and their gardens, and then they take their time to renovate the homestay. So they also can start using that sort of labor to in the downtime so that now they can open again. So I think the importance of these community-based tourism is one way to make sure that people don't over-rely on tourism. And then they lose their culture, they lose their livelihood. And then even like in Bali, they talk about the fields, which is the hallmark of Bali, are disappearing. So how can we develop tourism in a sense that it maintains the ethnicity and maintain the livelihood of the people and not take it away and turn them into tourism workers?
Very true, yeah. So yeah, that's a really good example. Actually, not the village is not totally relying on tourism like Bali, so the impact is not too devastating, right? So multiple income sources, not only on tourism, very important. I know we have only 5 minutes left. If you have anything else to say, Kathleen.
I would love to give some time to Hung Lu to say something, but she has to be unmuted.
Yeah.
Oh, who?
Hung Lu. I don't know where she is on your screen, but she's raising her hand. Hung Lu is right, you know.
Okay, I'll ask to unmute.
And she can speak to the Singapore silver lining.
Oh yeah, oh, I unmuted.
Yeah.
Hello.
So I think that one thing I wanted to add, not just about Singapore, was about the Chinese outbound tourism market. It is huge, and Southeast Asia has always benefited from this market because we are the nearest to China, right? And while in the short term, of course, everyone's depending on domestic market, and the China market is probably the only place which you are seeing recovery, precisely because of domestic tourism. Then in the next step, like in half a year, in a year, when the Chinese tourists have the ability to get out of China, the first place that they're going to explore is Southeast Asia, without a doubt. Not just because it's cheaper and it's nearer, but because in the whole episode of this whole COVID situation, Southeast Asia has proved itself to be places which, when you have a lockdown, people do stay in. You know, it's like when you ask people to wear masks, then everyone actually does. So, you know, it's like, it shows a certain kind of, it grooms a certain kind of confidence. And I would say that the Chinese tourists are actually following this. They are looking at it. They are watching how Vietnam emerged really well, South Korea, and their kind of perceptions of Singapore being safe, although we have a lot of cases. You know, it's like it all actually matters. And in half a year's time, in 1 year's time, when these kind of travel restrictions start lifting, when we have the testing capacities, which China actually has heck of a lot of testing capacities. So if if there is actually coordination with the other ASEAN countries to allow they test on their end and then they come and they test when they arrive and all sorts of things like that. Actually, there is a very big possibility that there could be a regional kind of opening up that's far faster than elsewhere. And so I think that is one thing which I really see from being based in a Chinese university. In the Singapore side, the other thing I wanted to add is that Singapore is a very small country. Like we're a city, right? Like 45 minutes, you get to the other end of the city. And so being locked down in our own countries where we are so used to when I see a dentist, I'll drive into Malaysia, because it's half the price. So we're so used to living lives like that now that it's taken away, it has really consolidated the identity of Singaporeans as a mobile people, as a people who go around Southeast Asia all the time. So it really consolidated this as an identity of people. And I think that, I don't know how much this is true of other people around the world, but being shut in really makes you realize why you really wanted to go out. I mean, of course, it also changes leisure patterns. But I thought that for Singapore's perspective, everyone is dying to leave the country, but nobody dares to, right? So when we have the chance to, I think that all these really matters in how tourism will then develop. But of course, people will be afraid of people. So, there could be some diversification to more rural places, which would be great, right? If we think about all the over-tourism issues. I mean, just some thoughts. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Harang. It's a really good point, especially from Singaporean and the China side of a point, because the Southeast Asia, they want to start up open up with China, and they're the main source market. So yeah, absolutely important. We have actually 2 more minutes. Mary, do you have anything to add?
I mean, yeah, there's so much that we could say. I would say that it's very interesting how the COVID pandemic has really triggered people's awareness of the need for diversification. And this is in Thailand for sure. You see this in all of the sort of discourse around what do we do next? How do we sort of how do we compensate for this loss of around 20% of our economy? You even see, so in Thailand, actually, if we are thinking about community-based tourism and a lot of rural villages that depend on tourism, oftentimes these are initiated by NGOs that suggest that people shift from agriculture to tourism as perhaps a more lucrative market. But this has created a lot of problems for many places in Thailand where they put all their eggs in the sort of tourism basket. And I've seen some articles that describe how they're now trying to rapidly shift to online commerce as one way to diversify or to reach a broader market. So that's quite interesting. I've also seen this read this really interesting article where somebody had turned a parking lot for tourists into a farmer's market, right? So this kind of rejuvenation of urban space is quite fascinating.
Can I piggyback on that? Because we're seeing also right now for survival, and I think it exists in Thailand as well, but in Bali especially, a very a burgeoning set of online experiences, right? So people who run homestays, who've invested entirely in the tourism industry and don't have the fields anymore to depend on, are now offering those experiences online, and cooking classes, carving classes. These things are whole new markets for people and new ways of plugging into communities across the world that would normally get to have these kinds of encounters with people halfway around the world. So that's kind of exciting, and a kind of stream of revenue that could continue well beyond the time when we find a vaccine. Sorry, Mary, didn't go back.
No, absolutely. I think this is quite fascinating. And it extends to like what we're doing right now, right? We actually don't need to wait an entire year to see each other at the AAG.
I can organize this tomorrow again.
Thank you.
That's great.
Or Giang, do you have anything else to add I know it's actually overtime, but yeah.
No, I think it's good to really reflect on the positivity of things, and I think it's important to really take time and reflect again, because I think we have this over tourism movement. I see it as a social movement that started, that has the opportunity to shape the future of tourism in a way that's more inclusive and more sustainable. But then because of the pandemic, it seemed to die down. And a lot of the talk about, okay, resetting tourism seemed to go back into that mindset of, okay, how can we get this running and get the tourists and the money come back again? So it's important that we reflect on opportunity to really go back to, okay, what do we want for our future of the destination? And we will find the silver lining in that, I think.
Thank you so much. Kathleen, any final?
Oh, can I show an image of some of the new kinds of artistic creativity for local markets on the part of Taraja crafts people? Let's see if I can do this, if it'll share the right screen.
Yeah,
Here we
there's
go.
a share button, right?
I know, and I'm trying to get, I'm on 2 screens, so I'm not sure.
Oh.
Okay, what are, yeah, okay, look.
Yeah.
Okay, let's see if I can move my thing over.
Oh,
Are you seeing it? No?
I just saw it. Oh, yeah.
Are you seeing that?
Oh,
Yeah.
wow.
So these are masks that Taraja artists are now making. One person in particular, Sama, has been making these as well as paintings. Let's see if I can go on. Can you see that screen?
Yeah.
No?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. A painting, are you seeing the painting on the left? I can't really see what you're seeing, unfortunately. The painting on the left is the coronavirus in Taraja artistic style.
Wow.
These are people or effigies defending Taraja against this, and these are water buffaloes. If the virus gets in, the water buffaloes will get them. And this is being sold to give proceeds to families, children who've been impacted by coronavirus. So the masks are for local markets, though I hope they're hoping to find some online markets. Anyway, I don't want to take.
That'd be nice if they can sell online. I would buy.
Yeah.
I would too.
So
And that's what
creative.
we're
Yeah, it's so
hoping to
beautiful.
make that happen. So let me get out of there though and stop sharing that screen.
Thanks so much for showing this. This is a perfect example for silver linings, isn't it? Exclamation mark. Well, thank you so much for joining us and your time, and really fruitful conversation. It was informal chat, but again, there are lots of key issues here. So actually, I'll write up this as a blog story on anthropology, the tourism interest group. So hopefully you see in a few days. But thank you so much. Stay positive and well.
Bye.
Bye.
See you all.
Thank you.